When I came back from rehab and walked up to my porch, something felt wrong immediately. My front door had a shiny new lock, and my old welcome mat was gone. Before I even knocked, let me say this. Subscribe, tell me your age and where you're watching from. For you it's a small thing, but for me it's the reason I keep telling these stories. Now back to that door. I tried my key. It didn't fit. I tried again, harder. Nothing. My stomach tightened the way it used to before bad news at the factory. The door suddenly opened, and a young woman I'd never seen frowned at me. Can I help you? Yes, I said. This is my house. She laughed right in my face. No, sir. We bought this place 2 weeks ago. From a woman named Deirdre. My daughter. My only daughter. Before I could speak, a man in a baseball cap joined her, chewing loudly on something. Oh yeah, he said. The old guy. She said you moved into assisted living. I didn't, I replied. I was in rehab for my hip. This house is mine. He shrugged like it meant nothing. Well, it's ours now. Papers are signed. Maybe talk to your daughter. They shut the door. Just shut it. Right in my face. I stood there on the sidewalk with my small hospital bag, staring at the home I'd worked 40 years to pay off, and realizing my own child had sold it like it was an old toaster she didn't need. But that was only the beginning of the truth I was about to uncover. You won't believe what came next. I walked down the street with my little hospital bag bumping against my leg, feeling like a man who'd returned from war only to find someone else living in his tent. The wind picked up, cold and smug, like it was whispering, told you your daughter was trouble. I stopped near the corner bench. My old neighbor, Mr. Burwell, used to sit there feeding squirrels. Now the squirrels sat on the bench themselves, glaring at me like I had interrupted their property meeting. One of them even slapped a peanut against the wood as if to say, "Move along, old-timer." Great. Even squirrels didn't respect me. I finally gathered myself and called Deirdre. She answered on the third ring, sounding busy. Too busy to remember she had a father. Dad, I was going to call you later. No, I said, keeping my voice calm. You're going to explain right now why strangers are living in my house. She sighed, long, dramatic, the kind teenagers use when they're asked to take out the trash. Dad, please don't start. We had to sell it. Wesley had a financial emergency and, oh, Wesley, I muttered, rubbing my forehead. Of course, your husband's emergencies come more often than the mail. She didn't like that. Dad, don't be unfair. He's under a lot of pressure. Pressure? I snapped. He's 42 and hasn't held a stable job since the late 90s. What pressure? Video game tournaments. From the other end, I heard Wesley yell, I placed second that year. Great. He was eavesdropping. I closed my eyes. Deirdre, you sold my home. Without asking me. Without telling me. It's not as bad as you think, she said. You'll stay with us. We already put clean sheets in the guest room. The guest room. A tiny, windowless storage room that smelled like wet cardboard and Wesley's old bowling shoes. I'll find another solution, I said quietly. Dad, don't be dramatic, she snapped. Just come over. Wesley made chili. I remembered Wesley's chili. Let's just say it once blew the lid off my slow cooker and knocked out the cat for 40 minutes. But before I could reply, she added, Look, you'll understand everything when you get here. Just come. Her voice sounded strange, nervous, guilty, and that's when I realized she was hiding something bigger than Wesley's debts, something she desperately hoped I wouldn't discover. And believe me, what I found out next didn't just shock me, it changed everything. I took the bus to Deirdre's place because I refused to let Wesley pick me up. Last time he drove me anywhere, he hit a trash can and blamed it on a sudden gravitational shift. When I stepped off the bus, their house came into view. Paint peeling, lawn half dead, a plastic flamingo leaning to one side like it had given up on life. The whole place looked exactly like Wesley's personality, tired, confused, and slightly sticky. I knocked. The door swung open so fast I almost punched it by accident. Dad, Deirdre said, throwing her arms around me. She smelled like stress and discount shampoo. Behind her, Wesley waved a wooden spoon like a conductor leading a soup orchestra. Chili's almost ready, he said proudly. This batch only exploded once. I stepped inside. Boxes everywhere, piled on tables, chairs, even on top of their golden retriever, who looked like he'd accepted his fate as furniture. Then I noticed something odd. 3 boxes were labeled in my handwriting. My handwriting. Why are my things here? I asked. Deirdre's face twitched. Oh, we got your stuff from the house before. You know the sale. You packed my belongings without me. Wesley helped, she said, as though that was a compliment. Wesley beamed. I organized everything by smell. I stared at him. By smell. He nodded proudly. Yep. Earthy smells, spicy smells, mystery smells. I spotted one box labeled probably food. I decided not to open it. As I looked around that cluttered living room, my old photo albums stacked next to their cat scratching post, my tools shoved under a foldable treadmill they never used, I felt something heavy in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, just grief. Grief that my life had been boxed up like yard sale leftovers. Dad, sit, Deirdre said gently. We'll explain everything during dinner. And the way she said it, the way her eyes darted toward Wesley like she hoped he wouldn't say anything stupid, I knew there was another secret waiting. And what they told me at that dinner table made the house sale look like a warm-up act. We sat at the kitchen table, if you could still call it a table. Half of it was covered with mail, the other half with Wesley's mystery spices, which looked suspiciously like crushed cereal and paprika. Deirdre placed a bowl of chili in front of me. It made a sound. Chili should never make a sound. Wesley grinned. That's the bubbles of flavor. I poked it with my spoon. It poked back. All right, I said. Tell me what's really going on. Deirdre's fingers twisted the napkin. She avoided my eyes. Dad, Wesley owed money. I nodded slowly. Yes, you mentioned that. Wesley jumped in. But it's not my fault. I invested in a vision board business. In what? You know, pictures glued to cardboard that inspire people to succeed. And how much did this inspiration cost you? I asked. He cleared his throat. Well, technically, a little over 30,000. I froze mid-bite. The chili stopped bubbling, like even it was shocked. $30,000, I repeated. Deirdre squeezed his hand. Dad, we didn't know what else to do. We needed that money fast, and your house was the only asset we could sell quickly. So you sold it, I said softly. My home, your mother's garden, the workshop I built with my own hands. Silence. Even the dog looked ashamed. Then Wesley, in a moment of catastrophic stupidity, added, It's not like you were using it. Deirdre kicked him under the table so hard the spoon flew out of his hand. I leaned back, feeling something inside me tighten. Not anger. Not yet, but a cold, clear understanding. They hadn't asked. They hadn't apologized. They hadn't even considered what that house meant to me. And worst of all, they were still hiding something. I could see it in the way Deirdre kept glancing toward the hallway, because what she showed me next made the sale look almost innocent. After dinner, Deirdre stood up, so suddenly her chair squeaked like it was filing a complaint. Dad, there's something you need to see. Wesley froze mid-slurp of his chili, eyes wide, like a man who just remembered he left a candle burning near a curtain. Honey, maybe we don't, she cut him off. No, he deserves to know. My stomach tightened. Not because of the chili, though that was a battle of its own, but because of the tone in her voice. She led me down the hallway, past stacks of laundry, past a broken lamp Wesley promised to fix in 2019, until we reached the guest room. She opened the door. I blinked. Hard. My furniture, my dresser, my armchair, even the quilt Hattie sewed, was stuffed into this tiny room like a garage sale attacked the place. But that wasn't the worst part. On top of my dresser sat a mountain of envelopes. Dozens. Maybe 100. All addressed to me. Bills. Bank statements. Letters from the rehab center. Even property notices. I turned slowly. Deirdre, why do you have my mail? She swallowed. Dad, we changed the mailing address while you were in rehab. We thought it would be easier. Easier for who? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. But Wesley did. We didn't want you stressing about money. So we handled everything. Handled. I stepped closer. You sold my house, hid my mail, and rerouted my bills, without telling me. He nodded proudly. Exactly. We thought we were helping. I stared at the pile of envelopes. Months of my life. Hidden in a room like forgotten junk. Then I noticed one envelope sticking out from the bottom, different from the rest. Thicker, stamped with the county seal. I pulled it free, opened it. My breath caught. It wasn't about selling my house. It was about what was under it. And that's when everything suddenly made sense. Why they rushed the sale, why they hid my mail, why they never wanted me to go home. Because the truth inside that envelope was worth far more than my house, and they thought I'd never find out. I stood there, holding that thick county envelope, feeling my pulse in my fingertips. Wesley leaned over, trying to read it upside down like a nosy pigeon. "Is it a coupon?" he whispered. "No," I said. "It is very much not a coupon." Inside was a notice from the county about a historic property reevaluation. Apparently, months before the sale, officials had discovered something under my land, a buried foundation from the late 1800s belonging to an old carriage station, which meant the land, my land, qualified for a special preservation grant. A very large grant, the kind that adds extra zeros. Deirdre paled. "Dad, we didn't know what it meant." "Yes, we did," Wesley blurted. "I Googled it. It said the land value could triple." I closed my eyes. There it was. The truth. They hadn't just sold my house to cover Wesley's disasters. They'd sold it fast, quietly, cheaply, because they were afraid I'd see this letter first. Afraid the land would become too valuable to touch. "So," I said slowly, "you sold a property worth 3 times the price for pennies?" Wesley tried to smile. It seemed like a good idea at the time. The time being when? I snapped. "During one of your chilly explosions?" Deirdre buried her face in her hands. "Dad, we messed up. We thought the county would take months. We thought you wouldn't want the hassle. You thought I wouldn't find out," I finished. And the room went silent. Even their golden retriever tiptoed backwards like he didn't want to be part of this drama. I looked at the envelope again, and at my daughter, scared, ashamed, avoiding my eyes, and something inside me hardened. This wasn't just a mistake. This was betrayal, and it was time they learned exactly who they were dealing with. Because what I did next turned their little secret into a lesson they would never forget. I didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't even sigh. That alone scared them more than any shouting ever could. Quiet men are dangerous, especially old quiet men. We've lived long enough to know silence is a weapon. I folded the county letter, slid it into my jacket, and walked back toward the kitchen. Wesley followed me like a guilty duck. Sir? You're not mad, right?" "Mad? No. Mad was too small for what I felt. I felt awake. I sat down at the table and calmly pushed Wesley's chili bowl aside. The bowl slid, then hit the salt shaker and caused a tiny avalanche. He gasped like he'd witnessed a murder. "Dad," Deirdre whispered, "please say something." So I did. "I'd like to call the buyers of my house." Wesley nearly choked on air. "Why?" "To congratulate them," I said calmly. "They purchased something very valuable." He squeaked, actually squeaked, like a rubber toy. You're not going to tell them, right? Because if they find out about the historic thing, they might cancel our deal or ask questions." I finished. Deirdre grabbed my sleeve. "Dad, please. We'll fix this. We'll figure something out. Just don't tell them yet." Wesley nodded so fast his baseball cap slipped sideways. "We can negotiate. Maybe buy the house back? Or distract them somehow. I'm good at distracting people. One time at Walmart, Hush, I said. And he hushed immediately. I leaned forward, looking at both of them. "You didn't just betray me," I said. "You underestimated me." Deirdre's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, we didn't mean to hurt you. We were desperate. Desperate people ask for help," I said. "They don't steal it." She broke, shoulders shaking, eyes red. For a moment, the angry father in me softened, but not enough to forget what they'd done. The truth was simple. They had sold something priceless, and now they were terrified I'd take back the one thing they cared about, the security of their mistakes staying hidden. But I wasn't done yet, because what I did the next morning didn't just shock them, it changed the balance of power completely. I woke up early the next morning in their cramped guest room. If you can call a room guest, when the main decoration is a broken vacuum and 3 mismatched pillows. One pillow was so flat it felt like sleeping on a newspaper subscription. I stretched, groaned, and stepped on something soft. Wesley's sock, still warm. I almost screamed. That was my sign from the universe. Today, everything changes. I got dressed, grabbed the county letter, and headed to the kitchen. Deirdre and Wesley were already there, sitting rigid like 2 kids waiting for the principal. Wesley even had his spoon clutched in his hand, his comfort utensil, apparently. "Morning," I said. They flinched. Both of them. "Good. I'm going to my house," I continued, "to speak with the new owners." Wesley shot up so fast his chair toppled over. "You can't. You shouldn't. We made waffles." I looked at the waffle. It was shaped like Texas and somehow still raw in the middle. No, Deirdre's voice cracked. Dad, please just wait. Give us a chance to fix this. I slipped on my jacket. No more waiting. As I reached the door, Wesley blocked it, arms spread, like a very nervous scarecrow. Sir, what if they don't like visitors? Then they can throw me off my porch, I said. But I stepped closer. He stepped back, all the way into the coat rack, which collapsed on top of him like a soft, cowardly avalanche. I'm leaving, I said calmly. Deirdre looked desperate. Dad, please. We'll lose everything if you tell them. They might sue us, or report us, or that, I said, pausing at the door, is your consequence. Not mine. The room fell silent. Even the refrigerator stopped humming, probably out of respect. I walked outside, feeling the crisp morning air hit my face. For the first time since I came home from rehab, I felt steady, focused, in control. They had taken my house, but they had forgotten something important. I still had the truth. And when I arrived at my old front porch, something happened that neither Deirdre nor Wesley ever expected. I walked up my old driveway, my cane tapping the concrete like it was knocking on memory's door. The new owner's car was in the driveway, a bright blue minivan with a bumper sticker that said, "Honk if you love gardening." Good. Garden lovers were usually decent people, at least better than chilly exploding sons-in-law. I took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened, slowly this time. A man in his late 40s, tall and polite-looking, blinked at me. Behind him, his wife peeked out. "Oh," he said, "it's you, the previous owner." "Yes," I said. "May I speak with you?" They exchanged a quick look, the kind couples use when silently asking, "Do we let this stranger in, or do we pretend we're not home?" Finally, the man nodded. "Come in." I stepped inside. My old living room looked different, cleaner, brighter, and the air actually smelled like lavender instead of Wesley's collection of manly air fresheners. I pulled out the county envelope. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm here to tell you something your Sellers never did." The wife frowned. "The Sellers, your daughter?" I nodded. Her face softened immediately, like she'd put the puzzle pieces together. My husband and I always thought something felt rushed. Too rushed. I handed them the county notice. They read it together, eyes widening. "Oh my," the wife whispered. "This property is worth nearly triple what we paid." "It is," I said, "and that's why they sold it fast." The husband looked at me with sympathy, not anger. "Sir, I'm sorry. Truly, this shouldn't have happened to you." I nodded. "I'm not here to take anything from you. The sale is legal. The house is yours." They both looked stunned. "You're not asking for it back?" "No," I said. "I'm just making sure the truth lives somewhere other than a cardboard box in a tiny storage room." For a moment, we all stood there quietly. Then the wife suddenly said, "You know, if you ever want to visit the garden, you're welcome anytime. We kept your wife's marigold patch. It's beautiful." My throat tightened unexpectedly. Hattie's marigolds. Still blooming. I thanked them and turned toward the door. But before leaving, I added one last quiet sentence. "There's one more thing I need to do today." Because showing them the truth was only half of it. The next part was confronting the two people who had lied, stolen, and underestimated me. And when I walked back to Deirdre's house that afternoon, what happened inside would finally decide everything. When I walked back into Deirdre's house, the air felt tight. She was pacing. Wesley was sitting on the couch motionless, like he'd unplugged himself from life. The moment they saw me, they froze. No words, just fear. Real fear. I hung my jacket, sat down at the kitchen table, and let the silence stretch until Wesley practically squeaked. Finally, Deirdre whispered, "Dad, what did you do?" I looked her straight in the eyes. I told them the truth. Wesley let out a sound somewhere between a groan and a dying accordion. "We're done. They're going to sue us. Or call the cops. Or, no," I said calmly. "They aren't doing anything to you." They both blinked, confused. "I didn't ask for the house back. I didn't accuse you of fraud. I simply told them what they had bought." Deirdre sat down slowly, rubbing her forehead. "Dad, why? Why would you help them and not us?" I leaned back in my chair. "Because they deserved honesty. You two never gave me that." Her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, we messed up. We were drowning. We felt ashamed. We didn't know how to ask." "You didn't ask," I said gently. "You took." Wesley raised a timid hand. "For what it's worth. I'm sorry, sir. Really sorry. Deep, painful sorry." "And are you done with vision board investments?" I asked. He nodded vigorously. Forever. I'm switching to something safer. Like folding towels at the gym. That, I said, is the wisest sentence you've ever spoken. Deirdre wiped her face. What happens now? I opened my folder and placed two things on the table. 1. A brochure for a small senior apartment complex near the park. 2. The county notice. I'm moving into my own place, I said. A quiet one. With a garden. I'll be fine. They stared at me. But what about the land money? Deirdre whispered. That money, I said, belongs to the new owners. They acted with honesty. You didn't. The truth struck her harder than any punishment could. She lowered her head and sobbed, not from anger, but from shame. I stood up, put a hand on her shoulder. I don't want revenge, sweetheart. I want you to grow up. I want you to stop letting fear and Wesley's ideas ruin your life. Wesley coughed. To be fair, most of my ideas are terrible. I nodded. At least he knows it. Deirdre looked up, her voice trembling. Dad, can we still visit you? Of course, I said softly, but with honesty this time. Real honesty. I left the house with my head high, the afternoon sun warm on my back. I no longer had the old home, but I had something better, my dignity, my freedom, and the peace of knowing I hadn't become like them. When I moved into my new apartment a week later, the manager handed me a small garden patch. I planted marigolds, Hattie's marigolds, and for the first time in months, I felt home again.